Yeah. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining us at this extra additional Sydney Local Planning Panel meeting. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, the Cammeraygal, on which many of us will be meeting today. And I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. This additional meeting is to consider the determination of a modification for 182 Carrabba Road, Carrabba Point. The panel members today are myself, Helen Lockhead as chair, Jan Morell and Linda McClure, expert members, and Ken Robinson, who is the community representative today. Just before we go any further, I just want to check that no one on the panel has any declarations of interest that they need to state at this time.
No conflict, thank you.
No conflict, thank you.
No
Okay.
conflicts.
Thank you, and I have no conflicts either. So as you would know, we did consider this at the meeting a week or so ago, but because of the confusion about the nature of the meeting, whether it was closed or a public meeting, normally the convention or the protocol is for 10 submissions of more. A public meeting is held, but because there are some crossed wires, that wasn't communicated correctly. So we're having this meeting again so that those who are making objections and those who are the applicant can have their say as was expected. So,
hello, Chair.
Sorry?
Chair, Councillor Gilly Gibson here.
Yes.
I'm just joining in by audio.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you.
Am I allowed to ask a question about the deferral of the meeting?
Not at this point. I think I'll
Okay.
just go through the protocol.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Just to get back to the agenda, the panel has been provided with an assessment report prepared by council staff, and the council staff have briefed the panel on the key issues the application raises. And we've read your submissions, and so there's no need to repeat these. I just request that you raise the issues that you really want us to focus on and that may not have been covered. If another speaker raises the same issues, you can confirm your agreement rather than repeating the same point. As you know, this meeting is being recorded, and so I would respectfully ask that everyone is considerate of each person speaking and remain on mute until it's your turn to speak. If you've registered to speak, I'll ask you to address the panel, and it's normal for us to ask individuals to have 5 minutes to address the panel and make their points, and for the applicant to have a little longer to respond to those. We may ask questions of the speakers to clarify our understanding of what is being said, and after we've heard from all of you, we'll adjourn the meeting to confer and make our determination. If you have registered to speak, you will know that all the panel's public meetings are recorded and are uploaded to the council's website, and the audio recording will be available within 7 days of this meeting. And there's to be no other recording of the meeting without prior permission. So without any further ado, I'll just ask the first speaker to address the panel. And remembering that the panel only makes a determination with regard to the consent and approval of the matter. Compliance issues are dealt with by council officers. So I'll just remind you of the difference in terms of our abilities to influence the outcome here. So the first person I've got noted down to speak is the neighbour, Marianne Beregi from 184 Carrabba Road, and also North Sydney councillor. So Marianne, are you there? I can't see you. Oh yes, okay, great. Okay, thank you. All right, so you've got 5 minutes to speak, and I think you're on mute at the moment. So if you could unmute, that would be great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now, thank you.
Thank you. Just before I start, and thank you, yes, I just wanted to disclose that I am making this presentation as a affected neighbour, but by way of transparency, I am a current councillor on North Sydney Council. I was elected in 2012, and in my first few years as a councillor, the council did determine DAs, And then the council opted voluntarily to have an IHAP. And then, of course, the state government have mandated panels, and I have been supportive of that decision. So now I'd like to begin. My name is Marianne Berrigy, and together with my family, we reside at 184 Carrabba Road, Carrabba Point. As the panel is aware, I have made submissions in relation to this matter previously, and I don't intend to repeat any of those submissions, which I understand you have been provided with. From the outset, I wish to state that I'm not asking the panel to review, reassess, amend or change any existing DA for 182 Carrabba Road. I'm not asking the panel to take compliance action in relation to any manner in which the existing DA was obtained. What I am asking is that the panel assess this current modification application using correct and accurate information so that the requested additional breaches of planning controls are assessed in the context of all the accurately determined breaches across the site. It is my view that the panel cannot reasonably conclude on matters such as bulk and scale and overdevelopment without an accurate picture of what is there already. And it would be, I would ask that you don't approve anything on the basis of information which you know or might reasonably suspect to be materially inaccurate. By my assessment, the actual breaches in the existing DA, when calculated using accurate information, far exceed those detailed in the architectural plans and schedules submitted by the applicant in support of the present modification. Using correct ground levels, my calculations indicate the top floor roof exceeds the maximum height by 2.5 metres, and the area of exceedance is around 40% of the building footprint, not 4%. Contrary to the position shown in the plans, the exceedance is not confined to the northeastern corner, but runs across the entire eastern part of the building and is most acute in the southeastern part of the building. This information is now known, and further applications or modifications such as that before you today involve further breaches of controls. I now turn to the council reports. The council report of the 23 May 2022 only expressly recognises a concealed further height limit exceedance at one point on the northern section. However, the report then further acknowledges a more significant concealed height exceedance on the southern section in the context of discussing errors in landscaping. In the second last paragraph of page 10 of the report, dated 23 May 2022, reference is made to 6 square metres of landscaping behind motorcycle bicycle parking, being raised 2 metres above natural ground level, but at the same level as a previous concrete structure. The level for this landscaping is shown as RL 21.47 and is the same landscape level above the non-compliant laundry, now the subject of this consideration. As such, the report acknowledges that natural ground at this point is 2 metres below RL 19.47. Adding the height limit of 12 metres to this level produces a maximum height of RL 31.47. At this same point, the architectural plans presented to you show the building height has a height of RL 33.9, and that this part of the building sits comfortably below the limit. Thus, it appears that the architectural plans before you suffer from a material error and conceal a further height limit exceedance of 2.4 metres at this point. As such, it seems that critical information in the architectural plans is materially incorrect. Contrary to material in the council report, it is not my contention that the survey suffers from error. My contention is that the existing ground levels drawn on the architectural plans and which are being used to assess height compliance are inconsistent with the survey, the pre-existing suspended slab structure shown in the plans, with the existing boundary retaining wall, and with a simple observation of the site. The evidence, in my opinion, is overwhelming. The council report confirms the erroneous classification of some parts of the site as landscaping in the approved plans, including the area which is the subject of this modification. When fully assessed, corrected calculations show material breaches of site cover and landscaping requirements of the DCP. The panel requested the removal of an unapproved laundry and replacement with landscaping at the correct existing ground level. The applicant and council report, however, are advocating that the laundry structure remain in place as a void to be repurposed as a retaining wall with a raised garden bed above this. The requirement for a retaining wall at this point conveniently avoids any demolition and reconstruction. What is clear, however, is that the raised garden bed above a 2.7 metre high void comprising of 2 concrete slabs and a substantial supporting wall is not landscaping in accordance with the DCP. It is a structure. Further, it is a structure which does not comply with minimum setback requirements from the boundary. To properly consider this request for a further setback non-compliance, it requires proper detailing of all setbacks across the entirety of the site. The plans submitted for approval failed to identify a new zero setback wall 10 metres long and up to 5 metres high, because by only showing setback distances to structures above the wall, it is misleadingly suggested this wall is entirely below ground level, which it is not. I also ask that the panel, when making their determination in relation to this application, that consideration is given to including the additional conditions of consent, which I requested in my submission of 1 June 2022, so as to protect the safety, amenity and well-being of myself and my family. In closing, in my opinion, the development at 182 Carrabba Road represents a substantial overdevelopment of a severely constrained site in a foreshore area. The evidence before the panel indicates substantial height, site cover, landscaping and setback non-compliances, and now we are being asked to further endure further breaches. The architectural plans and schedules submitted for the present modification effectively conceal the true extent of these non-compliances. That you are being asked to approve further non-compliances on the basis of architectural plans and schedules containing erroneous information is something I would like the panel to take into serious consideration now that I have made them aware of this. Sorry. I'm respectfully asking the panel to exercise care and diligence in relation to the relevant facts it knows or reasonably ought to know or ask for information of as an expert panel with regard to the information that it has been presented with. I would like to request the panel refrain from making any decisions while there is reasonable doubt about the architectural plans and schedules submitted in support of the application, which in my view suffer from material error. I am also asking the panel to insist that accurate information is presented to it before it reaches any conclusions on this application for modification. In my view, the best way to achieve this is to ask the council to commission a comprehensive independent assessment of compliance with height, site cover, landscaping and setback controls for the site. The applicant then should then be required to submit architectural plans and schedules consistent with the findings of this assessment. Again, I'm not asking for a revisiting of an approved DA. What I am asking for is that the modifications are based on accurate information, which is now known and which had not been identified at the time that the original DA was approved. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Just to, I've got a question and then I'll ask the panel if they have any questions. Is your main issue the assessment of the non-compliances or the assessment of the impact of the non-compliances? I'm not quite sure I'm understanding the outcome that you're seeking.
I guess it's both. My issue is that it is now fairly, it can be seen that the approved DA, which currently stands, is much the breaches are far in exceedance of what the DA said. For example, because the ground levels were incorrectly stated, in my opinion, the height that has been gained, and when you look at every building around this area, and of course, what is being proposed is absolutely massive compared to what anybody else is able to achieve around here. It's almost a whole story higher than what and that is because the ground levels are out. What I'm saying is put the DA that's approved to one side. What you are being asked to determine now are further breaches on top of existing breaches. And I'm asking that you, leaving the DA aside, you actually, make sure that you're aware of what the existing breaches are, not to go back to the previous DA, but to say, actually, the breach that was in the DA is in error. The breach in the DA is more than the DA actually said, and we can't compound breaches and breaches and breaches and breaches and breaches. You need to go back to ground zero and say, what is the cumulative effect of what is being asked for now? And it is a massive increase in what anybody else would be able to achieve.
I think, okay, thank you for that. I just want to check if there are any other questions or comments from the panel.
Not from me, thank you, Helen.
And I just want to ask Stephen while he's there. Are you there, Stephen?
Yes.
So just to confirm that the staff did actually revisit those RLs, is that correct?
As mentioned in my report, there are clear errors, and whether they're to the extent that Ms. Berrigy is outlining or not, there were clear errors in the original assessment of height. And in the Mod 2, the issue of landscaping above the extension of a basement level attached to the car stacker wasn't identified. So that was also clearly in error. I think at the beginning, and I haven't gone through this in detail, the landscape area may have been correctly represented in the original DA, but certainly as highlighted in my addendum report, the area immediately above the unauthorised extension of the laundry bathroom is clearly not landscape area anymore, and I think I've quoted it as 8 square metres or something. So it certainly, I think in total quantum, if you started off with a landscape area, as I think was claimed in the DA of 41%, it's probably now down around 38%, i.e. 2% in non-compliance if the panel was to approve this in the current form. But you know, those issues are recognised. And as I stress, yes, there are issues around the height and the interpretation of height and natural ground level with the original application.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. So thank you very much, Marianne. We might now just move on to the next speakers, Ateni and Paul Lakatos from 176 Carrabba Road.
Thank you very much. We're here, sitting here, listening to this excursus about relative levels, and I have to say we're probably the least experienced in planning and so on. But if what I've heard from Ms. Baraghi and Mr. Beattie is correct, that there were errors as to the relative height, even though our present objections don't deal with this issue, but our original ones did. If that affects the bulk of the building, then we join with Ms. Baraghi in saying that that matter should be clarified. Clearly enough, if the council officer, Mr. Beattie, has said that there were errors, and Ms. Baraghi asserts that there are continuing errors, we join in saying that the height of this building is significantly larger than what was there before, and certainly from our perspective impacts on our privacy, which is really the main points that we were focusing upon in our latest objection. So I won't go further than say we support Ms. Baraghi's view about what she said and rely upon her no doubt greater expertise than we have about matters such as this. We certainly don't know the base details. We're not in a position to measure them or have them assessed, but we rely upon that. So then to go to a couple of issues, and really these may be only matters of clarification, but they are matters which concern us. So we are largely impacted by this building by the lack of privacy as to a range of windows on our side, and we're going to focus upon that. So a couple of things that I'd like to be able to be clarified if I could, because we're not entirely clear. In the original proposals, which were submitted and considered in the McFadden report in February 2022 and subsequently, and they are to be found at page 17 and 18 of the McFadden report, there are in each of the floors an entry to say support a full-length solid balustrade with frosting, etc., on the balconies, lower ground floor, and first floor. Now, they were partly privacy measures, in fact, probably to protect us mostly. And looking at the new C18 clause, which is to be found in Mr. Beattie's report of 8 June 2022 at the very end, the C18 privacy clauses, they have no mention of those other privacy measures which are referred to in the McFadden report and so on. So the question that we have is, are the measures which were the subject of an application in the McFadden report, pages 17 and 18, to be included in C18, or how does that work? Are we entitled to those protections of our privacy? Because if the new C18 makes no mention of any of those things. So this may not be a question to the panel, but it does concern us. So, Madam Chairperson, I don't know if you're able to answer that or it's your role to do so, but it's a matter.
Well, I noticed that you identified a window, which I noticed wasn't one of the ones identified for
Correct.
privacy measures.
That's right, W3.
W3, that's correct. That was the one I noticed, but are you saying there's other ones that was the only thing that I picked up, which we would certainly note in our determination?
No, look, to go back, I'll just read one extract from the McFadden proposal as I read it. So I'm reading from page 18 of Mr. McFadden's report of 17 February 2022, which sets out the proposed amendments. And for the lower ground floor, it reads as follows: substitute full-length solid balustrade with obscure stroke frosted glass to 1.6 metres with a full height solid blade wall, 2.2 metres long, with the remainder of the balcony a solid balustrade with opaque glass to 1.6 metres in height. The comment is supported. This solid wall will result in increased privacy for the neighbours, and it goes on. So that's what Mr. McFadden considered and approved, as I understand it. The conclusion in Mr. Beattie's report of 8 June 2022 as to privacy and the amendments to C18 does not include, for example, that particular recitation of material. So the question I have is, and I may be reading this wrong, I'm not an expert in these things, but if in the proposal there were these measures protecting our privacy, which were said to notionally come within C18, then I ask rhetorically perhaps, or in ignorance, why do they not appear in Mr. Beattie's summary on page 4 of his latest report of 8 June 2022? Or are they somewhere else?
Well, maybe we can ask Mr. Beattie that.
Thanks, Chair. The conditions as suggested by me are actually parroting the conditions as suggested by John McFadden in his independent review of this matter. And I think that the issue being raised by the Speaker might be a failure in that report to carry forward that condition into the actual condition set. And certainly if the panel was minded to approve this application, it could do so to introduce any condition that choose to address privacy concerns. But I think it's simply a failure for that to translate from the report into the report that the panel originally considered.
Okay, all right. So we can note that. So,
right.
Okay.
All right, so that's the first issue. The second issue is again, in the present conditions, there's a difference between 1,600 metres for obscuring, for example, privacy screens in condition C18 and 1,500 metres for obscuring windows which are nominated. And again, this is just me being intrigued a little bit. Why is there a discrepancy between those two limits? Some might say it's marginal, but for us, every reduction counts as an infraction of our present privacy. So my question is, C18 currently reads privacy screens, and this is as to level 2, frosted glass screens to a height of 1.6 metres, and yet in the other conditions relating to the various other windows, it's obscured to a height of 1,500 metres. Why is there an inconsistency? And quite frankly, we would prefer more privacy, 1,600 rather than 1,500.
Okay, I'll have to defer to Mr. Beattie again on that one.
Chair, 1,500's the, I guess, the typical standard obscure height or privacy screen height relating to a person's normal eye height. And certainly my eye height, and it generally works for people. I have no idea why John McFadden has chosen to choose 2 heights in conditioning, but certainly it could be all made 1.6 if that was the panel's view.
It may well be Mr. Beattie, and I don't know for sure, but Ms. McFadden may simply have repeated what the application wanted, in which case it wasn't him, perhaps, which had the discrepancy in mind. It was perhaps the applicant, and I'm just curious as to why that is. But in any event, look, I can leave that for the panel. You're well aware of our concerns in that regard. All right. Look, the last two matters very briefly. In the present condition for Windows 17 through to 40, which is the middle box of C18 in Mr. Beattie's report, latest report at page 4, it there intriguingly says, quote, the bottom half of the window to be obscured, whereas others are involved with measurements. I'm just a little curious. Why is one specific and one not? And how much wriggle room does bottom half leave when it comes to moving the obscure part of the panel?
Well, I will defer to Mr. Beattie, but the bottom half would seem to be the bottom half, the bottom 50%. But I'll ask Stephen why there's a difference in the.
Again, Chair, that's condition suggested by the independent consultant, and it's a matter that the panel can review if it's so minded.
Okay.
And look, finally, I'm sorry, perhaps I've taken up more time than you good people have to offer, but Madam Chairperson, you raised window W3, which we, of course, was not part of this condition, but Mr. Beattie has been good enough to write back to us and say it's a matter that we could raise with the panel. Look, quite frankly, that's a door and a window which looks out directly onto our veranda, which is the open side of our veranda. And although we did not, we've grown a hedge higher to try and obliterate some of that view to keep our privacy. But we'd be concerned, I think, if that's just an open glass door without a fairly significant obscurity by either glazed glass or something, which would maintain both their privacy, quite frankly, and ours as well. That is our only outdoor entertaining area. And I mean, we bought the place, so we're stuck with what we've got. We have a modest garden out the back, which is fairly frankly, probably not terribly usable. And so any outdoor living that we do is done on the balcony. Hence, any incursion as to the privacy would be a big issue for us.
Also from the dining area as well here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It looks out into our family room as well. So that's an issue for us. And I'm sorry, we didn't raise that previously, but that remains an issue for us.
Okay. I've noted that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the panel?
Thank you.
No. Okay.
No,
Thank you very much, Mr. Lakatos. So, Gilly Gibson, did you want to address the panel? She's
still on there, but she's on.
You're on mute, Ms. Gibson.
Still on mute.
you're
Oh,
on.
yes.
Okay,
Hello.
sorry.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, thank you. You're on.
I'm
You
just
can-
here as an observer. Thank you.
Okay, fine, thank you. We also have Rod Hills here representing the applicant. Would you like to address the panel? Rod, I can't see you. I assume you're here.
Yep.
Yes. Oh no, I can see you. Yes, yes. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Now you've actually heard from the neighbours. I mean, I think there's some of the issues from Mr. Lakatos are fairly benign and to some degree deal with inconsistencies in documentation, which we can address. The assertion from Marianne Beregi is more fundamental in terms of a reasonable doubt of accurate information. And would you be able to address that in your response?
I have the architect with me. I believe that we're dealing with a single level, not a multiple number of errors that have been mentioned. The current application before you, of course, is for predominantly internal changes. A number of those that the adjoining property raised about the balustrade, that now is a full height structural wall. So it's more privacy than you had in the original DA. A number of things through this have been reflecting on the original DA and previous approvals. But if I can just turn over to the architect to respond to that so-called erroneous error in that level. This is Daniel.
Good afternoon, panel. I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the information and the presentation by Ms. Beregi. As for the extent of the height exceedance, what we've done what we've reflected on the plans is what we understand to be the effective levels of the natural ground in those critical points where the sections have been cut through. And we're confident that they're a reflection of what the ground levels were like at the time of our site inspection and also at the time of surveying. The one spot level, which has been referred to as 20.06 odd, we're now in the process of determining exactly what that spot level reflected. What we feel is that spot level reflects a spot at a point, at a very distinct point, and not in fact the natural ground levels or the approximate natural ground levels in that area. So we're talking about the extent of non-compliance. As you know, the application was subject to a clause 4.6. The justification for that 4.6 was found to be favourable and was accepted by the council. So we're not talking about a submission here where no 4.6 was lodged, and in fact a 4.6 should have been lodged. There's been due assessment of that clause 4.6 for the exceedance in height. And I counter the comment that this building is over a level higher than it should be. That is not the case. And in fact, you'll see from the levels of the site, it's an extremely steep and undulating topography on that site. And the building, as approved, is in fact almost 2 levels lower than the height limit at the street frontage. So the assertion or the accusation that the building is a whole level higher than the height plane, I find is misleading. As for the questions relating to the landscape area calculations have not changed in this application. All the landscape areas which have been shown on the landscape calculation plan have been the same from the start of the application. Amended plans were requested during the initial application, during the initial assessment process. The landscape areas were adjusted to account for any volume changes to the building. And those landscape areas were assessed on merit. I remind the panel that the landscaping area it's a DCP control, and the proposed landscaping was assessed on merit and found to be acceptable. And that hasn't changed throughout the whole application, and the subsequent amendment applications haven't significantly altered those landscape areas. That landscape area that was spoken about adjacent to the motorcycle and bicycle space was always elevated and was always as part of a planter arrangement. By virtue of the fact that there was an existing concrete ramp below that, and it was impossible to achieve deep soil planting in that location. The intent of that landscaping is to soften the edge of the building and to create some landscape structures to create an appropriate transition between the built form and the shared driveway between the properties.
Okay. All right. Does the panel have any questions of the applicant and his architect?
The only question, thank you, Chair, is the laundry area where there was a previous request for extension which wasn't approved.
Yes.
Doesn't that intrude into landscape area?
No, it doesn't. That area was always void area below an existing ramp driveway between the shared driveway and the existing building. There was an existing building which was approximately, and I'm only say approximately 2 meters off the site boundary. Connecting the building to the shared driveway was a suspended concrete ramp. And that is where we have filled that concrete ramp to delete that portion of access to the building. And in favour of that ramp, we have the bicycle and the motorcycle spaces to meet the DCP compliance. And to embellish that space, we've included a deep landscape structure to improve that transition between the building and the boundary. So no, in fact, that landscape area was never intended to go to hit the earth below. Okay, and the laundry that's under question, I think the panel and the reporting, the multiple reports that have been made to the panel, the outcome has been that laundry addition should be removed from the application and is not approved. And we're in the position where we're accepting that decision. And effectively what we're talking about in terms of the remainder of the application are substantially internal alterations to the approved building. There's no build form additions to this application apart from the laundry, which has been determined to be inappropriate, and a roof overhang at level 2, which the panel has previously determined that we should only extend 150 mil or so from the previous application, 450 from the glass line, but the result is from the approved building form, it's an increase of 150 millimetres. They are the isolated 2 areas of volume change, one of which has been accepted at 150 millimetres, which we deem and consider to be small, and the laundry addition has been determined to be unacceptable, and we're accepting that decision.
Okay. Any other questions? Jan, do you have any more questions?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. And no other questions from the panel?
No, thanks.
Not from me.
Okay. All right. So thank you very much. Now I will draw this meeting to a close so that the panel can meet and just discuss this modification and make our determination. As you know, it will be available on the website within 7 days. So thank you for your time today. And we're mindful of the importance of this to all those concerned, and we will endeavour to treat it with the most respect as we would normally do. So thank you, and that's the end of the meeting.